Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into something kind of wild.
Always up for a challenge. What do we have this time?
It's a book called The Racket by Matt Kennard. He goes after, U.S. foreign policy hardcore.
Oh, wow. Straight to the point, huh? What's the angle?
He basically says it's a whole system set up to benefit the powerful, calls it a racket even, and that regular people are getting played.
Bold claim. Okay, so why should we listen to this guy? What makes him an expert?
Well, get this, he used to work at the Financial Times.
Whoa, like the Financial Times?
Yeah, the big leagues. And he says he couldn't write any of this stuff while he was there. Too explosive, maybe.
Okay, now that's interesting. It's like this feeling's in the air, right? Like people are starting to distrust the powers that be more and more. So his timing is spot on for that.
Totally. So he keeps saying racket, 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 but what does he actually mean by that?
Imagine, like, foreign aid, helping other countries. Sounds good, right?
Yeah.
But he's saying it's often a cover.
A cover for what, though?
Advancing U.S. interests. Not always, but often enough that it forms a pattern. It's like, sure, some good might be done, but who's really benefiting? That's what he's investigating.
And he gets really specific. Like, the U.S. military budget, he's all over that.
Which is huge EE, by the way, in case anyone forgot. Bigger than, like, the next 10 countries combined or something crazy like that.
Yeah, it's wild. And Kennard's saying this isn't just about, keeping us safe. It's about projecting power globally, even if it means going into massive debt to do it.
Which we are, by the way. Deep in debt.
Makes you think about those places where the U.S. has a big military presence. I was traveling a while back, and it was impossible to ignore, let me tell you. Felt like a whole different set of rules were operating.
Right, you get a sense of who's really calling the shots. And that ties into another big part of Kennard's argument, propaganda.
It's not just about the military, right? It's about controlling information.
Exactly. What we see, what we don't see, how it's all spun. Kennard has this whole thing about how when he was at the Financial Times, remember, the reason he left is because he felt like he couldn't tell the truth. Anyway, he talks about this one time they're writing about Mubarak, the former president of Egypt.
Okay.
Editors literally removed the phrase U.S.-backed when describing him.
Whoa. So even something small like that
Changes the whole narrative, and it goes deeper. Kennard talks about how even groups that seem like they're challenging power, they can still get caught up in this racket, he calls it.
Like who? Give me an example.
Index on censorship. They're all about free speech, which, good cause, right? But
Yeah.
they get funding from the National Endowment for Democracy.
And that's a problem because
Kennard argues the NED is basically a tool of U.S. foreign policy. So even groups fighting for good causes can be unknowingly advancing someone else's agenda.
Yeah.
Makes you think twice about where your information's coming from.
For sure. So, okay, if this racket is as big as Kennard says, where's the proof? What's he basing all this on?
He goes into a bunch of case studies. Haiti, Colombia, Bolivia, even how the U.S. treats Native American tribes right here at home. Whoa, okay. Let's break those down one by one. First up, Haiti. What's the deal there? Haiti's been through a lot, right? Kennard really digs into the aftermath of that earthquake back in 2010. You'd think all that international aid would be about rebuilding, helping people get back on their feet.
Yeah, you'd hope so.
Kennard says, not so fast. He thinks a lot of that money went towards pushing corporate interests instead.
Wait, seriously, like on purpose?
He points to this big push for privatization after the earthquake, especially something called integrated economic zones. Basically walled-off mini-cities within Haiti for foreign companies. They'd have their own rules, their own infrastructure.
Sounds kind of dystopian.
Right. Kennard's argument is that this mainly benefits those companies, and maybe a tiny sliver of the Haitian elite doesn't really help the average person on the ground.
It's like, let's just build a bubble for the wealthy and let the rest of Haiti figure it out.
And here's a quote that really stuck with me. Kennard quotes a State Department official who was involved in the reconstruction. This official said, "What's really going to change Haiti is the development of the private sector," and I think there's a consensus on that.
So basically saying the private sector is the answer, even in a place as messed up as Haiti after that earthquake.
Exactly. And that's what Kennard's challenging, this assumption that the private sector is always the solution, no matter what.
Heavy stuff. Okay, we've talked about Haiti, but what about Colombia? Where does the racket fit in there?
Colombia is a whole other story, but with some similar themes. Kennard goes deep on the war on drugs there.
Which has been going on for, what, decades now?
And caused so much violence, displacement, it's awful. And Kennard argues that while the U.S. frames it as this fight against crime, it's also been about maintaining control in the region.
And the people caught in the middle are the ones who suffer the most.
Exactly. Kennard wants us to connect those dots. Like our actions here, or the actions of our government, I should say, have very real consequences, even if it feels far away.
All right, deep divers, let's switch gears to Bolivia. Kennard talks about Evo Morales, right? Bolivia's first indigenous president tried to do things differently.
Totally. Nationalized industries, put resources in the hands of everyday people. He was a socialist, not shy about it either. And according to Kennard, that made him a target.
Which tracks with those WikiLeaks tables, remember? The US was really freaked out about Morales, especially because of Bolivia's lithium reserves.
Which, hello, super valuable these days. Kennard's argument is that the U.S. will actively work to undermine leaders who threaten its interests, even if they were democratically elected.
So even if you play by the rules, if you go against the racket, you're in trouble.
That's what it looks like. And it gets even more unsettling when you consider what he says about how the U.S. treats Native American tribes on its own turf.
Right. Didn't he say there are parallels to how the U.S. treats other countries?
Totally. He uses this example of the Delaware Nation. They were trying to get funding for a lighting manufacturing business. Seems simple enough, right?
Yeah, why not support that?
Exactly. But they faced all these roadblocks. Kennard's point is this isn't just an isolated incident, it's part of a pattern. Native American communities are often denied resources, which keeps them dependent on a system that's been screwing them over for centuries.
It's like he's saying the same playbook is used at home, A&D abroad.
Bingo. That's what makes this racket idea so powerful. It connects all these seemingly separate issues and shows you the system underneath it all.
So it's not just about, like, controlling resources. It's deeper than that, right? It's about controlling the whole idea of progress. What does progress even mean if you're stuck in this racket?
Totally. Kennard has this whole thing about the golden straitjacket, which, okay, sounds fancy, but it's basically this idea that countries have to adopt certain economic policies, usually the free market kind, if they want to get ahead.
And if they don't?
Then they're kind of screwed. At least that's the message. Kennard even quotes Thomas Friedman, the big shot columnist. Friedman actually called this golden straitjacket a necessary evil.
Necessary for WHO, though, right? That's the question.
Exactly. Kennard sees right through that. He's like, it's not necessary, it just benefits certain people, the ones at the top.
And the rest of us are stuck with the scraps.
Pretty much. And it's not just happening over there either.
Yeah.
Kennard brings up mountaintop removal mining.
Ugh, don't even get me started on that. They literally blow up mountains for coal. It's insane.
And the people who live near those mines, their health suffers. Higher rates of birth defects, cancer, it's messed up.
And I bet the companies say, but jobs.
Right. Of course. They always say that. It's like, yeah, jobs are important, but not at the cost of people's lives or destroying the environment.
It's the same story everywhere, man. The little guy gets screwed. But it's not just about the environment, right? Kennard also talks about the prison system.
Oh yeah, he goes there. He makes this really disturbing comparison to what Eisenhower said about the military-industrial complex.
Which is scary enough as it is, but what's the prison version?
He calls it the prison-industrial complex. Meaning private prison companies actually LOBBY for policies that lead to more people getting locked up. Because more prisoners equals more profits for them. It's sick.
It's like they're incentivized to keep people trapped in the system.
Exactly. And guess who gets targeted the most? Poor people, people of color. It's just perpetuating existing inequalities.
It's also bleak. Is there any hope in this book? Does Kennard give us any way out of this racket?
Well, he's not going to sugarcoat it. It's a tough read at times.
Yeah.
But he does point to sources of resistance, things that give him hope. Remember Occupy Wall Street?
How could I forget? That felt huge at the time.
People were FED-OP. They were out in the streets saying enough is enough, challenging corporate power, demanding more equality. Kennard sees that as a direct challenge to this whole racket he's describing.
It's like they were saying, we see what you're doing and we're not going to take it anymore.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about protest either. Kennard talks about art, music, movies, all these different ways people express themselves, resist, and connect with each other.
So it's not just about, like, policy papers and political campaigns. It's about culture, too.
Totally. It's about finding your voice however you can and using it to fight back against apathy, against cynicism, even if it feels like a long shot.
So it's not about having all the answers, necessarily. It's about asking the right questions and inspiring others to do the same.
Exactly. Kennard's book is a huge wake-up call, but it's not without hope. He's saying, look, this is messed up, but we have more power than we think to change things.
So what's the first step if someone's listening to this and feeling totally overwhelmed? Like, Where do I even begin?
Kennard says the first step is just recognizing the racket for what it is, seeing the patterns. Once you start to see it, you can't unsee it.
Like, awareness is the first step to recovery.
Exactly. It's about realizing, hey, things don't have to be this way.
Yeah.
Maybe you start having those tough conversations with your friends and family. Maybe you change your own habits. Support businesses that are actually trying to do good. These little acts of resistance, they add up.
It's about building a new world, brick by brick, or at least that's what I'm hearing. But he doesn't just focus on individuals, right? He talks about bigger movements, too.
Oh, yeah. He talks about Jeremy Corbyn, for example, the British politician.
Corbyn, wasn't he, like, really different?
He was a socialist.
Yeah.
Openly. Talked about nationalizing industries, putting people before profits. Basically the opposite of what the racket stands for.
Which is probably why he got so much pushback.
Oh, yeah. Kennard talks about how even the U.S. government was trying to undermine Corbyn.
Seriously.
Yeah, they saw him as a threat. Which is crazy when you think about it. A democratically elected leader getting targeted because he didn't fit their agenda.
It's like their definition of democracy only goes so far.
Exactly. And it's not just the U.S. either. Kennard talks about how other powerful countries are in on it too.
So it's a global system. This racket is everywhere.
Pretty much. But here's the thing. Kennard backs up his claims with a ton of research. This isn't just some conspiracy theory. He's showing you the receipts.
And even though it's dark, even though it can feel overwhelming, he's also saying we don't have to be ruled by this.
That's the hope. Recognizing that this system is unsustainable in the long run. We need a new way of being in the world.
It's kind of wild, right? Like, we're talking about these huge global systems, but Kennard also gets really personal in the book.
Oh, yeah. He talks about his own experiences, especially working at the Financial Times.
Which is way more impactful, you know? It's one thing to read some dry analysis, but when it's coming from someone who is inside the system.
And walked away from it.
Yeah.
Don't forget, he left a pretty sweet gig because he felt like he couldn't stay silent.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, look, I've seen behind the curtain, and it's worse than you think.
And it reminds you that speaking out against power, even when you have a lot to lose, that takes guts.
For sure. And it's not like he's just, you know, some random critic. He's actually been targeted for his work.
Oh, yeah. He talks about how once he started asking these tough questions, he became kind of a persona non grata in certain circles.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, he even mentions Thor Halvorsen, head of the Human Rights Foundation, trying to discredit him.
Whoa. So much for human rights, huh? It's like the minute you challenge the status quo, they come after you.
It proves his point in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They don't want this stuff getting out there.
So, okay, big picture time. If this racket is as pervasive as Kennard says it is, what does that even mean for democracy? Can we even call it democracy if this is how it works?
Right. It's like, where does the line even blur? It's almost like he's asking, what good is democracy if it can be manipulated like this?
And he doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but it's clear we got to do something. We can't just let this stand.
It's a call to action, for sure. Become more informed, more engaged. Don't be afraid to question things.
It's about reclaiming our role as citizens, right? Not just being passive consumers of whatever BS they're selling.
Exactly. We have more power than we think, but we have to actually use it.
So where do we even start?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Start small. Have those conversations with people you know, even if they're uncomfortable. Examine your own choices. Where are you spending your money? Who are you supporting?
It's about aligning your actions with your values.
Right.
Walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
And remember, you're not alone. There are people all over the world who are fighting for a better future. We just have to find each other, connect, and build those movements together.
That's what it's all about. So for anyone out there listening who's feeling overwhelmed, remember, this isn't the end of the story.
The racket is a wake-up call, but it's also a call to action, to hope, to possibility.
Well said. If you're ready to have your assumptions challenged and maybe feel a little fired up to change the world, The Racket is definitely worth checking out.
It's not always a comfortable read, but it's a necessary one.
Couldn't agree more. All right, deep divers, that's a wrap for this week. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride.
Until next time.
Keep questioning, keep learning, keep diving deep.